Nassau, Bahamas, 1715. A port town where no government holds power, no laws apply, and roughly 1,000 pirates have created their own society. Ships flying black flags anchor in the harbor. Taverns overflow with men spending stolen Spanish gold. And in the center of it all, pirates are voting. They're electing their captains democratically, dividing plunder equally, providing disability compensation for wounded crew members, and operating under written constitutions that guarantee rights their civilized European counterparts don't have. For roughly 30 years, from 1690 to 1720, the Caribbean and Atlantic coasts witnessed something unprecedented. Pirates created floating democracies more progressive than any government of their time. These weren't the romantic adventurers of movies. They were murderers, thieves, and outlaws. But they were also operating under political systems that included voting rights, checks on authority, social insurance, and racial equality decades before European societies would adopt these ideas. This is the story of the golden age of piracy, when criminals accidentally invented democracy at sea, while European monarchies ruled through divine right on land. This is about freedom, greed, violence, and the most unlikely revolutionaries in history. The golden age of piracy emerged from the chaos following the War of Spanish Succession, which ended in 1713. During the war, European powers had issued letters of marque to privateers, essentially licensing them to attack enemy shipping. Thousands of sailors made their living as legal pirates, raiding Spanish treasure ships and French merchants with official government approval. When the war ended, these privateers suddenly found themselves unemployed. They had skills in naval combat, navigation, and ship handling, but no legitimate use for those skills. European navies were downsizing. Merchant ships needed fewer crew members in peacetime. Thousands of experienced sailors faced poverty, unemployment, and returned to the brutal conditions of ordinary maritime labor. The alternative was simple: keep doing what they'd been doing, but without government authorization. Privateers became pirates, using the same ships, same tactics, same targets, but now keeping all the profits instead of sharing with governments. The transition from legal to illegal was seamless for many. The work was identical. Only the legal status changed. The life these men were leaving behind was brutal beyond modern comprehension. Merchant sailors in the early 18th century endured conditions close to slavery. They were beaten routinely by officers, fed barely enough to survive, paid minimal wages that were often withheld, and could be pressed into naval service against their will. Captains held absolute power, dispensing punishment without trial or appeal. Sailors had essentially no rights. The Royal Navy was even worse. Discipline was maintained through flogging that could kill. Food was rotten. Disease was rampant. Sailors died in enormous numbers from scurvy, typhus, and accidents. And naval service could last for years without shore leave, as captains kept crews at sea indefinitely to prevent desertion. The choice for many sailors wasn't between honest work and piracy. It was between brutal exploitation and dangerous freedom. Pirates created an alternative system almost immediately. When crews mutinied or captured ships, they faced a practical problem: how to organize themselves without reproducing the tyrannical captain system they'd just escaped. The solution was democratic governance. Pirates would elect their captains, vote on major decisions, and divide plunder according to agreed formulas. This wasn't idealism. It was practical necessity for men who had violently rejected authority. Pirate ships operated under articles, written constitutions agreed upon by the crew before embarking on voyages. These articles varied between ships, but shared common features. The captain was elected by majority vote and could be removed by the same process. The quartermaster, a separate elected position, represented the crew's interests and could overrule the captain in matters of discipline and plunder division. Major decisions, such as where to sail or whether to attack a particular ship, were put to crew votes. The articles also specified how plunder would be divided. Typical formulas gave the captain 1.5 or 2 shares, Officers like the quartermaster and gunner, 1.25 shares, and ordinary crew members, 1 share each. This was radically egalitarian compared to merchant or naval ships, where captains and officers received vastly disproportionate compensation. Pirates ensured that the men who did the dangerous work received fair shares of the rewards. Pirate articles included what we would now call social insurance. Crew members who lost limbs or eyes in battle received compensation from the common fund before plunder was divided. A lost right arm might be worth 600 pieces of 8, a lost eye 100 pieces of 8. This meant pirates had disability insurance roughly 200 years before most workers in industrialized nations would gain similar protections. Nassau in the Bahamas became the capital of the pirate world, a functioning anarchist community where roughly 1,000 pirates and their associates lived outside any government control. The British had abandoned their settlement there, leaving only ruins. Pirates moved in, establishing a base perfectly positioned to raid Spanish treasure routes and attack ships traveling between Europe and the Caribbean. Nassau operated without formal government, but wasn't pure chaos. Pirates established customs and conventions. Ship captains formed a loose council, making decisions about harbor use and defense. Taverns and brothels serviced the pirate economy. Merchants from American colonies came to Nassau to trade with pirates, buying stolen goods at discount prices and selling supplies the pirates needed. It was a functioning economy based entirely on theft and smuggling. The most famous pirates of the age made Nassau their home. Benjamin Hornigold, who taught the trade to several famous pirates. Charles Vane, brutal and violent even by pirate standards. Calico Jack, Rackham, whose flag design became the iconic skull and crossbones. Anne Bonny and Mary Red, 2 women who dressed as men and fought as pirates. And Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, who would become the most notorious pirate in history. Blackbeard understood theater. He was a large, imposing man with a massive black beard that he reportedly wove with slow-burning fuses during battle, creating smoke around his face that made him appear demonic. He cultivated a reputation for incredible violence, though evidence suggests he rarely killed unnecessarily. The reputation was enough. Merchant ships often surrendered immediately when they saw Blackbeard's flag, avoiding bloodshed that would have been bad for business. The democratic practices aboard pirate ships extended to racial equality that was remarkable for the era. Pirate crews included white Europeans, Africans, indigenous Americans, and people of mixed race, working together with a level of equality that didn't exist in any civilized society. Former enslaved people who escaped to pirate ships were accepted as equals, received equal shares of plunder, and could vote in ship decisions. This wasn't enlightened racial philosophy. It was practical necessity for crews that needed every capable fighter. Some historians estimate that up to 30% of pirate crews were of African descent. Many were formerly enslaved people who had escaped or been freed by pirates who captured slave ships. Pirates regularly freed enslaved people from captured vessels, offering them the choice to join the crew or be set free. Those who joined became full crew members with equal rights. The contrast with surrounding societies, where racial slavery was the foundation of the colonial economy, was stark. Women occasionally became pirates, though they were rare. The most famous were Anne Bonny and Mary Red, who both sailed with Calico Jack Rackham. Both women dressed as men and fought in combat. When Rackham's crew was captured in 1720, witnesses testified that Bonny and Reed had been among the most aggressive fighters during battles, and that they were 2 of the few crew members sober enough to fight when the pirate hunters finally captured the ship. The articles governing pirate ships also prohibited behavior that created conflict among crew. Gambling was often banned or strictly limited. Fighting between crew members was punished severely. Some articles banned women from ships, not from misogyny, but because competition for women's attention created deadly disputes among crew members. Pirates understood that maintaining crew cohesion was essential for survival, and they created rules to prevent internal conflicts. The democratic ideals of pirate society existed alongside shocking brutality. Pirates were criminals whose livelihood depended on violence and intimidation. The same men who voted on their captains and divided plunder equally also tortured prisoners, murdered civilians, and destroyed merchant shipping without mercy when it served their purposes. Pirate attacks on merchant vessels followed a pattern. When pirates approached a ship, they raised their flag, often the Jolly Roger or personal variations. The message was clear: surrender immediately or face violence. Most merchant captains surrendered without fighting. Their ships and crews weren't theirs. They belonged to distant merchants and investors. Captains had no incentive to die defending someone else's property, but when merchant crews did resist, pirates responded with extreme violence, both to overwhelm the defenders and to maintain their reputation. Ships that fought back and were captured faced massacre. Pirates made examples of crews who resisted, ensuring future targets would remember the cost of resistance. This calculated terrorism was central to the pirate business model. Prisoners were sometimes tortured for information about valuable cargo or for entertainment. Pirates developed reputations for specific cruelties. Some captains were known for torturing prisoners brutally. Others killed entire crews to leave no witnesses. The worst tortures involved burning, marooning on uninhabited islands, or practices too graphic to describe in detail. These weren't sadistic aberrations. They were tools for maintaining the fear that made piracy profitable. Captains who were particularly cruel to their crews before being captured by pirates faced special treatment. Pirates tortured former captains who had been known for brutal discipline, seeing it as justice for their former oppression. These executions were public spectacles, demonstrating that pirates rejected the hierarchical cruelty of legitimate maritime service. The violence was both revenge and political statement. The economics of piracy were unsustainable. Pirates didn't produce anything. They only redistributed wealth through theft. As piracy intensified, insurance costs for merchant shipping increased. Trade routes changed to avoid pirate waters, and naval convoys became common. These adaptations reduced the targets available to pirates. The pirate economy needed continuous expansion of victims, and that expansion had limits. Pirates also spent their money as quickly as they stole it. Most pirates weren't saving for retirement. They spent stolen gold on alcohol, prostitutes, gambling, and supplies for their next voyage. The cycle was continuous. Raid a ship, divide the plunder, spend everything in port, go raid another ship. This made individual pirates rich temporarily, but prevented accumulation of lasting wealth. Few pirates retired wealthy. Most died young or ended up destitute. The pirate life was also extraordinarily dangerous. Naval battles with armed merchant ships or warships sent to hunt pirates were deadly. Disease killed pirates at rates comparable to naval sailors. Hurricanes destroyed pirate ships regularly in the Caribbean. Marooning, being abandoned on an island as punishment, was a death sentence, and capture by authorities meant execution. The life expectancy of a pirate was perhaps 5 years after turning to piracy. By 1718, European powers, particularly Britain, had decided the pirate threat required systematic suppression. Pirates were disrupting trade, increasing costs, and challenging the fundamental authority of governments to control the seas. The Royal Navy received orders to hunt pirates aggressively and suppress the pirate republic at Nassau. The British appointed Woodes Rogers as governor of the Bahamas with a specific mission: end pirate control of Nassau. Rogers was a former privateer himself, a successful merchant captain who understood pirates and had the naval experience to fight them. He arrived in Nassau in July 1718 with a small fleet, several hundred soldiers, and a royal pardon for any pirate who surrendered. The pardon strategy was clever. Rogers offered pirates a choice: surrender, accept the pardon, and live peacefully under British law, or continue pirating and face execution when captured. The offer split the pirate community. Some pirates, tired of the dangerous lifestyle and willing to accept government authority in exchange for safety, took the pardon. Others, committed to their freedom and unwilling to return to legitimate society, refused and fled Nassau. Benjamin Hornigold, the pirate who had mentored many of Nassau's famous captains, accepted the pardon and became a pirate hunter himself, using his knowledge of pirate tactics to hunt his former colleagues. This betrayal was practical for Hornigold, but devastating to pirate solidarity. If even established pirates like Hornigold would turn, who could be trusted? Charles Vane refused the pardon and escaped Nassau, continuing his piratical career. He was eventually captured after being shipwrecked, recognized by a former associate, and hanged in Jamaica in 1721. Calico Jack Rackham initially accepted the pardon, but returned to piracy, was captured in 1720, and was executed. Anne Bonny and Mary Red were also captured with Rackham's crew. Both claimed pregnancy at their trials, which temporarily spared them from execution. Reed died in prison, probably from fever. Bonny's fate is unknown. She disappears from records, possibly pardoned, possibly escaping, possibly dying unrecorded. Blackbeard refused the pardon and continued operating from the coast of North Carolina, where he apparently had an arrangement with the colonial governor. Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy led an expedition to capture or kill Blackbeard in November 1718. Maynard's forces found Blackbeard's ship anchored near Ocracoke Island and attacked. The battle was brutal and personal. Blackbeard fought with savage determination, receiving numerous wounds but continuing to fight. According to contemporary accounts, Blackbeard sustained 5 musket ball wounds and 20 sword cuts before finally falling dead. Maynard beheaded Blackbeard's corpse and hung the head from his ship's bowsprit as proof of death and a warning to other pirates. The message was clear: even the most fearsome pirates could be killed. The suppression campaign was remarkably successful. Between 1718 and 1722, hundreds of pirates were captured and executed. Colonial governments in the Caribbean and American colonies held mass trials, condemning dozens of pirates at once. Public hangings in ports like Charleston, Port Royal, and Nassau served as warnings. The bodies of executed pirates were often displayed in cages at harbor entrances, left to rot as deterrents. The end of piracy was also economic. As the Royal Navy increased patrols, as merchant ships traveled in convoys, as insurance costs for pirated goods became prohibitive, piracy became less profitable and more dangerous. The risk-reward calculation that had made piracy attractive shifted dramatically against pirates. Former pirates who had accepted pardons found that returning to legitimate society, while offering less money and freedom, at least offered the possibility of dying in old age. The golden age of piracy ended, but its legacy persisted in unexpected ways. The pirate articles, with their democratic governance and social insurance, influenced later political movements. Maritime workers in the 19th century organized unions using tactics and principles similar to pirate crews. The idea that workers could elect their leaders and share profits equally became central to labor movements. Some historians argue that pirate democracy influenced the founding fathers of the American Revolution. Several American colonial merchants had traded with pirates, and some had been privateers themselves. The ideas of elected leadership, checks on executive power, and the right to remove leaders who abused authority were all present in pirate articles decades before they appeared in the Declaration of Independence and Constitution. The racial equality practiced aboard pirate ships was also influential, though its impact is harder to trace. The fact that African and European sailors worked together as equals aboard pirate ships demonstrated that racial equality was possible, even if the surrounding societies ignored that example. Some formerly enslaved people who had been pirates carried those experiences into communities of free black people in the Caribbean and Americas. The pirate image became romanticized almost immediately after the Golden Age ended. As soon as pirates stopped being an actual threat, they became figures of legend and adventure. Books, plays, and later films portrayed pirates as romantic anti-heroes, emphasizing their freedom and courage while minimizing their violence and criminality. This romanticization was so successful that we now associate pirates with adventure rather than murder. The reality was more complex. Pirates were criminals who lived by theft and violence. They killed people, destroyed property, and terrorized civilian populations. But they also created political systems that were more democratic, more egalitarian, and more just than the legitimate governments of their era. They were murderers who voted on their leaders, thieves who provided disability insurance, outlaws who practiced racial equality. The golden age of piracy lasted roughly 30 years, from about 1690 to 1720. In that time, a few thousand pirates operating in the Caribbean and Atlantic created floating democracies that challenged both the economic and political systems of European empires. They didn't intend to start a political movement. They were criminals looking for wealth and freedom. But they accidentally invented systems of governance that were revolutionary. The pirate articles that governed crews were more democratic than any contemporary government. Britain was a constitutional monarchy where the vast majority of men and all women couldn't vote. France was an absolute monarchy where the king's word was law. Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands were all authoritarian systems where ordinary people had no political voice. But aboard pirate ships, every crew member had a vote. Captains could be removed, and power was distributed through elected positions. The social insurance pirates provided was 2 centuries ahead of most national governments. Britain wouldn't establish comprehensive worker disability compensation until the 20th century. But pirates in 1700 were already compensating crew members who lost limbs in battle. This wasn't charity, it was contractual obligation written into articles that every crew member agreed to. Pirates understood that taking care of wounded comrades was both moral obligation and practical necessity for maintaining crew loyalty. The racial equality aboard pirate ships was perhaps the most radical aspect. In an era when African people were being enslaved by the millions, when racial hierarchy was the foundation of colonial economies, when slavery was legal and accepted throughout Europe and the Americas, pirate ships operated with black and white crew members as equals. This wasn't perfect equality, and racial prejudices certainly existed among pirates. But the basic principle that a man's race didn't determine his share of plunder or his right to vote was revolutionary. The contradiction at the heart of pirate democracy was that it was built on violence and theft. Pirates created just systems for themselves while inflicting terrible injustices on their victims. They provided for disabled crew members with money stolen from civilians. They voted democratically on which ships to rob and which prisoners to torture. Their freedom was purchased with other people's fear and suffering. This contradiction reveals something uncomfortable about democracy and equality. They can exist in bounded communities that practice exploitation and violence toward outsiders. Pirates treated each other with respect and fairness while treating their victims with cruelty. This same pattern would repeat in later societies that practiced internal democracy while maintaining slavery, colonialism, or other forms of oppression toward those defined as outside the community. The end of the Golden Age came from superior force, not moral reformation. Pirates didn't abandon their lifestyle because they recognized it was wrong. They were hunted down, captured, and killed by naval forces that eventually dedicated enough resources to suppressing them. The democratic systems pirates had created disappeared when the pirates themselves were executed. The ideas persisted, but disconnected from their criminal origins. That's how the golden age of piracy turned out to be, interesting and controversial. Thanks all the more for watching. I hope for your subscription and like.